The great filtering is upon us. Balteus is racking up eliminations faster than that kid that you knew who was uncomfortably good at Halo 3 Infection, and reviews are rolling in from people who are claiming that the boss is literally impossible, requires a specific build to beat, or is just too difficult for as early in the game as he shows up. And I decided, well, you know what? I really like this boss. And I really like the starter AC in Armored Core 6. So let's try and beat Balteus with the starter AC in Armored Core 6. And I did. So really, all those complaints just sound like a skill issue. Hello everyone, my name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and if you enjoy what I do, you find my content fun, entertaining, educational, anything like that, a like and a sub would be massively appreciated. I'm a small creator, making YouTube his full-time career, and I'm branching out from my normal genre of strategy RPGs by doing Armored Core content, so any support that you can provide would be massively appreciated. Thank you. All jokes about filtering and whatnot aside, yes, Balteus is actually a pretty nasty boss, and while there are some weaknesses and advantages that you can use to your advantage once you learn about them, I figured it would be a good time to show people that you don't actually need any of that, so long as you're quick on your feet, have good reflexes, and a little bit of determination to keep bashing your head against the wall, you can beat Balteus with pretty much anything that you want, including the most basic core in the game. I already put it at the beginning of the video, but if you do want to just skip to my successful clear, which is just one of the successful clears I've had doing this, by the way, it's just the one that I chose to show, you can jump to the timestamp in the description. I'll have the full clear as well as the build to show that there is no tomfoolery going on, no OST chips, no upgraded parts that are hard to see on the actual core, anything like that at the end of the video. But there's also a guide here, because I know there are going to be people out there who are still struggling with Balteus who could use some information about how to handle him, so we're going to talk about that first. The thing to understand about Balteus is this is a shock and awe attrition fight. Balteus wants you to think that his big flashy attacks are the thing that you need to be worried about, so that when he comes in out of left field with his actual hard-hitting attacks that are going to be what end the fight for you, you're not really prepared for it. Also, Balteus doesn't have the same concerns that you do. He doesn't have to worry about ammo. He doesn't have to worry about health. He's got way more mobility and resilience than you could ever hope to have at this point in the game, even if you aren't using the starter mech. And on top of that, he's got a big-ass pulse shield that you have to chip through regularly if you actually want to damage his health. To mitigate those advantages, you need to stick to him like glue. Stay on the offensive, charge up in his face constantly. Hit him with melee attacks, hit him with your regular attacks, chip the shield down, stagger him as often as possible, because any time that the boss spends staggered is time that he's not spending shooting at you. And as an AI, both literally, like because he's an AI-controlled boss, and also in the story, he's not going to get worn down the way you are. He's not going to start making mistakes the way you will if the fight drags on too long. So above all else, you need to be ready to just lay into Balteus and not get overwhelmed or intimidated by the attacks that he's using to try and do that exact thing. Let's quickly run through some of his biggest attacks and how he's going to be utilizing them against you, and then we'll talk about my strategy for how I actually suggest you approach the boss, whether you're using the starter AC or a build of your own. First off, the signature attack, what my viewers have been calling the ballistic porcupine, which is a term that I've affectionately taken to using now as well, the giant missile barrage. These come in various flavors, whether it's the entire circus or just certain vertical or horizontal missile barrages. But if you know Balteus, even if you haven't played Armored Core, you probably know this attack. It's his signature move, and funnily enough, it's probably one of his least threatening attacks. These missiles don't actually deal that much damage individually, and while there might be a ton of them, you're generally faster than them and are generally capable of dodging out of the way and preventing yourself from taking too much damage from them. Realistically, whenever Balteus goes for one of these big attacks, that's your opportunity to counter right back, because it locks him in place and he spends a fair bit of time going through the animation of firing these missiles. And so long as you stay near him or under him, you're naturally going to avoid the majority of them and have plenty of opportunity to lay into him with whatever weapons you have on hand. Again, this is where that shock and awe comes in. The boss wants you to be afraid of these missiles, be focused on dodging them and trying not to take too much damage from them, even though they don't deal that much damage, so that he has the opportunity to hit you with some of his bigger attacks, such as the bazooka, or as I've been starting to see a lot of people refer to it, the F you missile. This is probably the single most dangerous attack that Balteus has in his first phase, and I would argue is potentially the most dangerous attack that he has throughout the entire fight. He'll fly up in the air, pause for a microsecond, you'll get a quick visual and auditory alert, and then he will absolutely ram a massive missile down your throat faster than you can blink. If you want to avoid this attack, you need to be paying attention for it, and you need to make sure that you have boost and energy available. The reason for that is because you need to time your dodge very precisely here, as this is an input read. If you try to dodge as soon as you hear the alert, Balteus will adjust its aim and will hit you when you stop your dodge. You actually need to wait for the microsecond after the alert fades, in between when the alert happens and when the boss fires, and then dodge, because then its aim will be locked in and you should be able to get out of the way. If you're on the ground, I recommend doing a quick hop up into the air and then dodging to the right or the left. It doesn't really matter unless there's like a missile barrage you're trying to avoid, because the splash damage on the ground will hit you if you're not careful, and that will rack up over time. Remember, this is an attrition fight. So hop up into the air, do a quick dodge right before the boss fires, and you'll be able to avoid this 9 times out of 10. This was absolutely the biggest attack that caused frustration and losses for me, to the point that my chat was really starting to mock me about it. Oh, there's an alert, you can hear it, beep, beep, beep. Like, I know! It's just so hard to keep track of in the midst of everything else, but again, this is a shock and awe fight. The boss is relying on you being distracted by its smaller, weaker, but flashier attacks so that it can hit you with the big humdinger. In the second phase of the fight, this is even more important, because not only does this bazooka deal absolutely ridiculous AP damage, but it's nigh guaranteed to stagger you if you have any other chip damage on you from the boss's other attacks. And in phase 2, as soon as you're staggered, it's very likely that you're going to be taking a giant flaming sword flamethrower thing to the jaw, potentially multiple times, which will pretty much guaranteed kill you. So again, it is imperative that you avoid this bazooka whenever possible. The fortunate thing is, if you're sticking to Balteus, as I recommend, and really laying into him in melee range, he's not very often going to try to use the bazooka, because he wants to try to move out of your range and get a little bit of distance so he has time to set up the attack. If you're on top of him constantly, he'll spend more time trying to move back to line up the shot than actually firing at you, which is the plus for you. As far as Balteus' other attacks go, especially in phase 1, there's not as much that you need to worry about. He has his Gatling gun that he'll use to deal chip damage and build up your stagger meter. You want to avoid that if possible. You're going to take some hits from it. It's just pretty much, I mean, it's not unavoidable, but it's going to hit you more often than not, especially if you're someone who's just an okay player, not some Omega God player far and beyond my skill level. So don't be afraid about getting hit by this sometimes. Just try not to let him wail into you with it, because it will stagger you, and then that's when you'll get hit by the bazooka. There are also a variety of other little missile barrages and things like that, but if you're already avoiding the missile circus from his big signature attack, you should be able to avoid those as well. Just move into the attack and then dodge forward or back, and the missiles will just zoom right by you. It's really not that big of a deal. Finally, he has his shotgun blast, and this actually does take people by surprise, because it can deal a fairly surprising amount of both AP and stagger damage. Just if you see him lining up for the shot when you're in melee range, just dodge to the left or the right, and it should zip right past you. There really is just a lot of paying attention to the boss's moves and avoiding them once you've learned what the patterns are, in true From tradition. In phase 2, this is where things start to get a bit trickier. There is, of course, the opening combo, which we'll talk about separately in my strategy, but overall, all of Balteus' attacks are going to get more aggressive and more varied, while also throwing in his various flamethrower attacks that can be quite nasty, but once you can recognize them, are pretty clearly telegraphed. There is, of course, the traditional fire sword. The majority of the time you can jump up over this if he's doing a horizontal swing. If he's doing vertical swings, you generally want to try and move underneath him, as he'll then spend his time spinning in the air trying to line up another attack, and generally they'll be pretty easy to avoid as a result. Just try and dodge forward away from the attack and it'll whiff past you. If you try to do a side dodge or move up and down with these vertical slices, generally he's able to adjust and hit you anyway. So try and dodge forward, not through. That's pretty much all of Balteus' major attacks that you need to worry about. So let's talk about some strategy. When opening the fight, I highly recommend assault boosting immediately directly under the boss, and either hitting him with your strongest attack, or if you're using the Pulse Blade, which I highly recommend, as we'll talk about in a moment, hitting him with your first opening combo of that. As long as you're standing directly under Balteus, you'll take very little, if no, damage from his opening missile salvo, and it'll give you a fairly decent opportunity to start weakening his shield. From there, you pretty much want to be sticking to the boss constantly and firing your weapons constantly. Ammo and cooldowns, of course, being the primary concern here. The most important thing is to try and keep Balteus on screen. He will do his best to get behind you and then confuse you by continuing to spin around so that your camera can't track of where he is as he's launching attacks at you. So do your best to adjust your camera to keep him in the center of your screen at all times, not only for targeting, but just so you know where he is and what attacks he's throwing at you. Whenever he tries to boost away, if you have the energy, I do recommend assault boosting towards him immediately and launching attacks as you do so. This will either A, let you weaken his shield, or B, if his shield is down, massively increase the stagger damage that you're dealing. This is not something I'm seeing people use nearly often enough, but if you are using attacks such as a rifle attack or a missile attack while you're assault boosting, it does increase the stagger meter on the boss. And again, keeping Balteus staggered is extremely important. This is particularly valuable when he does his big charge up and zoop to the other side of the arena move before he starts launching another missile circus at you. So just assault boost towards him, get underneath like you're at the start of the fight, and you should avoid the majority of these missiles and have more opportunities to get damage in. If you are using a melee attack in this fight, which I recommend that you do, especially with the Pulse Blade, as it will deal largely the most damage at this point in the game to the boss's shields as anything else that you could get, you need to be using it on cooldown whenever possible. Remember, this is an attrition fight, so getting your attacks in pretty much on cooldown is going to be massively helpful. Close in on the boss, and if he's at all stationary or even only moving slightly, trigger your attack. So long as he's within range and doesn't quickly zoop out of the way, you should be able to get your 1-2 hit combo in, and make sure that you are getting both swings in, as it uses the same amount of energy and it's going to literally double your damage if you land both strikes. If you go for your attack and the boss does dip out of your range, either to avoid the slash or because he's going into an animation like moving to the other side of the arena, quickly try and quick boost to cancel the animation. This is something I haven't seen a lot of people talk about, but you are actually able to preserve the cooldown on your blade if you quickly cancel the animation with a quick boost. This will refund all of the energy utilized for the attack. You'll be able to go into another swing immediately if you so choose, and you can sort of dance towards the boss, energy allowing, until you're finally in range to get that hit in. If you wind up losing the attack, at least you'll still have dodged if he's trying to counter, and you can keep on keeping on. If you have a high rate of fire, low damage, but plenty of ammo weapon, such as the basic starting rifle, you pretty much want to be laying into the boss continuously with it, as while it might not deal huge chunks of damage to his shield, it will continue to wear it down over time, and you may very well find yourself in a position where you can preserve your big attacks, finish off the shield with the rifle, and then lay into Balteus while he's staggered. This was something I utilized regularly while using the basic starter core, as the sword was not only my best source of damage against the shield, but my best source of damage against Balteus' health as well. So if I got the shield low, and I knew I'd be able to break it with the amount of ammo I had ready in my rifle, I would do so, then move in for the big swing. If you're using something like laser cannons, grenade launchers, whatnot, similar type of deal. If you have a smaller weapon that you can finish the shield off with and then immediately lay into the boss with those big attacks, do it. It's important to keep in mind as well, there are a few different health gates where different things will happen in the fight. When you first get Balteus down to a quarter health, he will pretty much immediately recharge his shield, so try not to waste too much ammo at that point, as it might wind up just breaking against his shield instead. When you get to around the halfway point, that's when Balteus will move into phase 2, but you do have the opportunity to sneak a bunch of extra damage in when he's in his weaker, slower first phase if you're careful. Once you're getting to around the halfway point, try and wait until the boss actually brings its shield up again so that you can get a full stagger in and push him past his halfway point for his health. What I mean by this is, if you can see here, I've got the boss down to around 2/3 of its health remaining. I let its shield come back up, break it, and then now while he's staggered, lay into him with everything and actually push him past the halfway point, closer to like a 1/3 health point. And that's way less time that I have to spend in his phase 2, where he's going to be generally more dangerous and be putting the pressure on way more. If you can make this happen, great. Unfortunately, sometimes there is a little bit of variability to when Balteus does trigger phase 2. I've had times where he's basically at 2/3 health and then triggers it, so it's a little bit touchy, but you can make this work for you the majority of the time. Finally, when you get the boss down to his last quarter health, he will again fully recharge his shield automatically, So you can't expect to really push through too much unless you have some truly insane damage output that typically is going to come from having some later parts when you're redoing the fight. It's not impossible to do. You could do a dual shotguns, dual laser cannons build and really burn the boss down while he's in his stagger. But for the majority of people, you're probably not going to be running that type of build. So just pay attention for these different health gates and what they trigger. As I mentioned previously, we do need to talk about that opening combo that Balteus does when you first get him into phase 2. He'll do the initial pulse armor explosion before sweeping you with his Gatling gun as he pushes forward towards you. He then goes into one sweep with his flame sword, a double shotgun blast, a quick missile barrage, and then he'll push towards you and do a horizontal fire sword sweep followed by a double diagonal fire sword sweep. Then he'll fall out of the combo and proceed with combat as normal. Honestly, the best thing that I can recommend for avoiding this combo is to just be ready to give the boss distance once you knock him to his second phase. As soon as you get that final stagger and push his health bar beyond 1/2, you just deal as much damage as you can and then turn around and float away. You want to be using your boost so you can get as much distance as possible because the boss will just go into his full combo. But if you have enough distance, you can avoid getting hit by pretty much all of it, and even as he lunges towards you with the flame swords, you'll have plenty of opportunity to dodge underneath him to avoid them. There's going to be some learning to be done in this fight, as there is in all good FromSoft fights. There's going to be times where you lose as you're trying to figure out what attack the boss is going for next and aren't quite able to predict what's going to be coming at you. But so long as you have the concentrated will to keep working on it and not throw in the towel, you can absolutely figure these patterns out, and then that's where these strategies that I'm providing for you now will really come into play. As far as my challenge run is concerned, I found that you really do have everything that you need to handle Balteus in the starter build. The basic RF-024 Turner rifle that you start the game with is actually pretty nice for this fight because it has all around decent impact damage, AP damage, range, and most importantly, it has an absolute buttload of ammo. So you can just lay on this thing pretty much constantly and either be building Balteus' stagger meter if you have his shield down, or continuously chip away at his shield and deal a fairly decent amount of damage to it cumulatively over the course of the fight. P20 MLT-04 missile launcher is a fairly decent addition to the build as well. It's pretty much just there to help with damage. It's not going to be a key factor or anything, but just having this, again, with 140 rounds to be continuously laying into Balteus with, weakening his shield, lowering his health, building his stagger bar. It's nice compared to something that has relatively limited ammo, no tracking, or generally slow projectiles. It's just all around a decent weapon. Of course, the core of everything here, no pun intended, is the Pulse Blade, the starting high 32 BU-TT/A. This is going to be what breaks the shield. This is going to be what deals the most damage. This is going to be what deals the most stagger damage. And without this, doing the fight with your basic starting build would be infinitely more difficult. With a relatively quick recharge time, good tracking, and good damage, as well as, again, being a pulse blade, so dealing good damage to Balteus' pulse shield, this thing is going to be your bread and butter. And even if you're not doing this challenge build, I highly recommend considering it if you're struggling with the boss anyway. Compared to something like the pulse rifle, that like the little bubble gun that people are recommending, this thing doesn't have any ammo concerns. It's not overheating constantly, it just has a recharge time. And you can pretty reliably have it deal both damage and shield damage for you. So I like it a lot more than the pulse rifle. This with the pulse rifle will absolutely shred the boss's shields, but you do want something that's going to have more range and ammo anyway. So having this alongside a rifle is honestly something that I recommend quite highly. And that's pretty much all there is to it, honestly. Charge in at the beginning of the fight, get under Balteus whenever he tries to use his missiles, just like I recommend you do at the start of the fight. Avoid the bazooka by getting into the air, jump over the flame blade or dash through the flame blade, depending on whether it's a horizontal or vertical type attack, and just keep the pressure on. Continuously stagger the boss, continuously stagger or stick to him, and he'll be trying to avoid your attacks more than he'll be attacking you. And it's a surprisingly doable fight. I think the final clear with the starter build only took like 2 minutes and 40 seconds or something like that, which is pretty quick. I know people have killed Balteus in under a minute, but that's with like meta builds and parts that you can only get once you've beaten him once. So I'm pretty happy with it. I'll show you the full run now, and let me know what you guys think. It's not a perfect run by any means. I was getting low on health. I was getting low on repair kits. I could definitely do way better, and I'm sure other people can and have done better. But but I just wanted to demonstrate that this is absolutely feasible. I'm not a god gamer by any means. I'm good, but I'm not the best out there. If I can do this with the starter build, you can absolutely do this with some stronger picks, some stronger parts, and some more focused effort. And that's what I want people to understand. You don't have to let yourself get filtered by this game. You don't have to get completely knocked out of the fight by Balteus. And there's so much good to see here. I don't want to see people miss it because they struggle and get frustrated in this fight. So stay focused, stay determined, utilize some of the tips and suggestions I've provided in this video or that other creators provide in their content, and go kick ass, man. You can absolutely do it. I 100% believe in you, and you'll have a great time for it. The satisfaction of bringing down a boss like this cannot be beat by anything else in gaming, I promise. With all that said, remember, I am a small creator trying to make YouTube my full-time career. If this was fun for you, a like and a sub would be very much appreciated. I hope that you find nothing but success in Armored Core going forward, and let me know if there's other guides or content you want to see for the game. I'd be happy to do it, because I'm absolutely adoring every second that I spend in this game. Enjoy the full clear. My name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there, and remember, be good to each other. Bye now.
Main system, reactivating combat mode. I've looked into the enemy craft. It's an autonomous PCA craft, Balteus. You'll have to break its pulse armor to inflict meaningful damage. Pulse armor down. Now's your chance, Raven. I've taken your comms link offline for now. That massive dose of coral nearly killed you. Please, you have to focus on winning this. The waves are intensifying. Raven, get clear. Up a massive heat signature. Evasive action, Raven.
One repair kit remaining. AP at 50%. Light shoulder ammunition at 50%.
The enemy can't take much more. Enemy systems down. It's silent. Raven. You need rest. But first, a warning. coral surge you were swept up in? That was just a glimpse. A premonition of the storm of flame that will burn Rubicon.